Hello, and welcome to the second podcast of the new year, Your Relationship Makeover. We're your relationship experts, Poppy and Jeff Spencer. In today's podcast, which is Tuesday, January 10th, of Your Relationship Makeover, we will cover our trademark tool, the emotional clock, and the perils of the emotional Bermuda Triangle.
That sounds scary.
Last week, we shared with you some stories from people with whom we worked, and we asked you about your own emotional checkup. Where are you in your relationship? Hopefully, you've had some time this week to think about it. We introduced our word of the year, which is listen, and we thank you for listening in.
And we have a special surprise for you, a free downloadable gift on our website, 5 words to say to your partner tonight to immediately improve your relationship and create intimacy. That sounds especially good.
I know. So today you'll learn about our patented communication tool, the emotional clock, one we developed kind of organically as we wrote our first book, 1 Billion Seconds, which is our true life story of lost and found love. We looked very hard at our own relationship while we were writing our book and the relationships we've experienced along the way, and certainly from my 7+ years of teaching college psychology, to really delve into how people communicate and even how they fail to communicate and the progression that they go through. We researched and studied human behavior for dozens of years, and now we've made it our life's work to help people just like you connect better and better. We've shared our tool with hundreds of people to help them improve their relationships and create more intimacy. And as Jeff just mentioned, you can go on our website, relationalexperts.com, and download your 5 words to say to your partner tonight. My background as a therapist taught me that when we have a tactile tool we can hold and manipulate in our hands, we can override those overwhelming emotions and begin to sort things out in our left brain. We can get some really clear thinking going on.
We wanted to kind of introduce you to the clock, and we want you to imagine that the old traditional analog clock on a circle, not a digital clock. And if you look at it, and clients can have one of the things we've talked about, again, a tactile tool. They can express where they are. When we're talking to our clients, they often are struggling to express what they're feeling and where they are emotionally. And this tool makes it very easy for them. They can point and say, "Oh, here I'm angry. I'm at a spot where I'm angry." And we say, "Oh, yes, you're at 5 o'clock on our emotional clock." But I want to kind of take you through what the different parts of the clock are. We start, of course, at 1 o'clock is what we call confusion, where you're just feeling something's a little off. You're not quite sure what it is in your communication and your relationship, but something's off. And if you don't address it, this will grow, and it might start making you feel anxious. And you're again because there is something and you're not talking about it, you're not addressing. You move on to 2 o'clock anxiety. And again, if you don't address it, and we're going to keep going back to this idea of addressing it.
Yeah, we harp on it.
Yeah, addressing it's going to be the important thing. You can tell we're going to get back to. You move on to almost a feeling of despair sometimes, because that's where we are at 3 o'clock at despair, where you aren't taking care of a problem, and it's really making you feel bad, and you're very upset about it, and you're not quite sure what to do. And because of that, people often then move on to the 4 o'clock setting of shame and guilt, where they feel very badly that there's something that's really bothering them, but they're not dealing with it, and they feel guilt about it. They're ashamed of their feelings. And if those aren't addressed, and this is usually especially true with the guys, it's very easy for us to even skip 4 o'clock and go right to anger. That's something that we're really mad about and it hasn't been addressed. And obviously a dangerous place to go when you're at anger. And then the next very important piece of the clock, the 6 o'clock setting, I've often addressed it as kind of the wall. This is a spot where you're really hitting a spot where you feel like, I can't stand where I am anymore. This is the fight or flight kind of spot. And I have to do something about it. And this is often where Poppy and I first make contacts with clients. They're often coming to us because things are very wrong and need to be addressed. And this is a spot where it is a scary spot to be. This is where the concept I'll talk about this regularly. The concept of courage. This is where you really have to face the most frightening and scary things, because you have to address whatever this problem is, and it might bring up some very, very challenging ideas that your relationship might be in big trouble now because you haven't addressed these things. You're afraid that there are some problems that might not be able to be fixed. You're wanting to keep the relationship together. You don't know if you can or not, or you might be at a spot where you're saying, gosh, I think the relationship is badly broken and I need to potentially move on from this relationship. So this is a critical wall that one is hitting.
And our clients have often described where they are in their relationship. And as Jeff mentioned, they come to us stuck in that challenging loop between 3 and 6 o'clock, despair, shame and guilt, anger, and even fight or flight. And that's a very fearful spot, that whole loop And so we had one client recently who shared with us that she started at 6 o'clock when she first came to us, and then went backwards. And even though she wanted relief, which is 7 o'clock on our clock, her own uncertainties and fears just sort of overcame her. And she got sucked back into what we call the emotional Bermuda Triangle, that loop between 3 and 6 o'clock. And what was so interesting, and we call the right side of the clock the disempowerment side of the emotional clock. And of course, the left side is the empowerment side, which we'll get to a little bit later.
And one of the things, Papa, you just mentioned this. This is a very common thing we see happen. People get to that 6 o'clock where they say they need to do something, but the idea of moving forward is just so frightening that they do loop back, and they stay in this situation where they kind of just keep going backwards because the fear of moving forward is way too much.
Remember that we had that one client, and we by the way, we never give away any names or anything. We always change the name to protect confidentiality. And let me just insert something here because we talked about it last time. But if you're new to our podcast, we serve more like architects. We had our master coach told us that he thinks therapists are like archaeologists. They dig up and they look for things from the past. And we fashion ourselves as architects, as coaches who propel you to set your measurable goals into action and get attainable results. So that's how we support you.
And this is not meant to be a judgment that one is right or wrong. Many times, Poppy and I have had people come to us and we said, we feel that there's a lot of other things you need to address in your background before you're in a position to really move forward. And we will suggest a therapist in therapy for them.
Absolutely. Yes. We will always refer you to get the best for you.
Back to our emotional clock. And the client that Poppy was mentioning, Sarah, she was at this wall and looking at this very frightening wall. And it was easy for her mind to kind of fill in some blanks here of glimpses of good things that did happen. She said, "Wow, this is my husband,
soon to be ex,
is being very, very nice, and it's just sort of kind of unnerving to me. He's being nice again." And maybe things have changed, and maybe we can make it can change. Maybe he'll love me again. And it causes one to have, take these second guessing or even third guessing yourself. And maybe this person will change, and maybe we can have a whole new shot at something.
And she wanted to then alter her own goals and thoughts and feelings to adapt to this new changing mood that was very intermittent, to say at the very best.
And just like the Bermuda Triangle, that is a very treacherous and scary place, there are elements of this that are very inexplicable, where, it's really hard to sometimes for people to wrap their heads around this whole idea, just like any kind of complicated relationships. But we've learned from our clients that there are many behaviors that we scratch our heads at, wondering how they come up with the thoughts that they've shared.
Yeah. Well, tell us a little bit about, just in case somebody doesn't know what the Bermuda Triangle consists of.
Yeah, Poppy and I came up with this idea, when we talked about the loop that people can get in from like 3 to 6 o'clock where they can't seem to break out. The Bermuda Triangle is an area in the Atlantic Ocean that has some history of some very weird things happening where compasses go all awry. Planes have been lost, ships have been lost, and there's been movies and other stories about this. People have often heard about it. So a lot of bad and inexplicable and very weird things. So this is where we talk about behaviors often fall into this as well.
Right. And by the way, as relational experts, we never are attached to the outcome of our clients. And we don't tell them what to do. We don't give them advice. We don't tell them we only extract from them their goals and desires, and then we support them and hold them accountable. And then, if you think there are behaviors and promises that your partner can live up to, we would never dissuade you from staying the course if you wanted to stay in that. The only thing that we would recommend, of course, is if there is a very unhealthy relationship, perhaps abuse or something else, mental illness, we would suggest then that you would seek professional psychologists or therapists of some sort. Mm-hmm.
What we do see, however, is that some of our clients have already repeated these cycles over and over again of these promised behaviors that changes, but nothing has changed. And maybe there's a substance abuse issue. That's very common. And the significant other has committed to a clean lifestyle. I'll never drink again, but has not begun to take on that commitment. We gently remind the client that this is a repetitive cycle. We ask them, what do you see that has changed? And are there differences that warrants another chance? We know that this is common for so many of us to go back to the familiar, even though the familiar is not healthy. It's just known. So it's a safe place to go.
And we reassure them, we remind them, and of course that's one of our hallmarks of our success, I think, is that we are a very nurturing couple. We bring a great perspective, a husband and wife team working together. We bring a male and female perspective. And our sole goal is to uplift and inspire you.
And the other thing that happens, sometimes the other partner has influenced us so much that we become convinced that we are less than we really are. We see this happen many, many times where, they get so much, verbal abuse or just they've been talked down to so many times.
Or criticized.
They've been criticized that or they believe that they just can't live without that person. You can't go on without me. You can't afford to do anything. Clients have become dependent and don't have any conscious awareness of this deep dependency in an unhealthy relationship. This is where this idea of the emotional Bermuda Triangle between the 3 and 6 o'clock area becomes a prominent lock in setting up for so many people. But despair, shame, and guilt, anger, and fear of flight, they just stay in this. They can't seem to break out of that.
Right. And it's been shown that, just like this is the new year, we change habits. When I was teaching psychology to my college students, many of them, we did a segment where we had a challenge to break down a habit or a pattern that we no longer desired. And it takes a minimum of 21 days. So if someone's been married, one of our clients was married for, 7, 8, 10, 15 years, that's a lot of habitual changing that needs to change in that pattern. So it is going to take some time. The other thing we were going to talk about, if there are children involved in a relationship that has many challenges, the emotional stakes become even higher. We had a client who made the decision to divorce. In the 7 months that we worked with her, she visited the emotional Bermuda Triangle many times. She slid back into time again and again, but we were always there to emotionally kind of tow her out. And we served as kind of her safe harbor. And it's hard for any of us to see a way out when you're in the thick of it. One example was, she said, I think I should stay in this, and we inserted the word unhealthy. I think I should stay in this relationship because I'm not sure how to financially support my kids. Well, we worked with Jenny to help her see other possibilities, other alternatives to figuratively tow her out from being swallowed in her triangle of doubt and fear.
And we worked with another person, a male client, for several sessions. He'd been in his relationship for many years and become a master at dodging the questions about how he really felt. Whenever we brought this up, there was always the conversation would go different directions. He was residing consistently, at 3 o'clock, despair, and 4 o'clock, shame and guilt. His fear was so strong, and he even acknowledges that he is afraid. He's afraid to try to make a change, afraid of his spouse. Very highly educated and successful professional, but his personal life is completely shipwrecked in the Bermuda Triangle. He acknowledges the relationship is doomed. And while we did provide some relief to Mike, it was only temporary, and that's perfectly okay. We outlined possible scenarios, and he reassured us that we assured him that we were always there for him.
And one of our roles as certified and licensed New Life story coaches is to always get our clients to share their goals, one, and also to state their next step. And Mike's goal, after he left with one of our many sessions, was to assimilate all that we had shared in the sessions and to commit to a future session. That was the babiest and the biggest step that he could take. And he did do that. He took baby steps to detach himself little by little from the toxicity of his relationship, and slowly he regained some of his own independence. And therein was his immediate relief at 7 o'clock.
Now, he is still in the Bermuda Triangle, but he knows that from working with us that there is a way out. His despair was lessened a whole bunch, and he felt much better just knowing that there was a pathway out. If Mike can get to 6 o'clock, the fight or flight setting on this emotional clock, he'll be in a situation where he can either summon the courage to move forward and extricate himself from that unhealthy relationship, or resign himself that he might remain in the emotional Bermuda Triangle.
And if he does choose, and choose is the operative word here, to stay stuck, will help him make the best of it. I think when we talked about one of our clients, Charlie, we'll work with Mike to highlight the positives in his relationships. Perhaps physical and financial security is his primary motivation. We're not really sure, but without judgment, and we never make judgments on our clients or their stories that they choose to share with us, will help Mike align himself with his preferences and accept the decisions that he makes so that he's very clear on exactly what he's doing.
And if Mike decides to summon the courage and take this leap of faith, and it is a huge unknown, this is a tipping point. This is a tipping point where the pain of staying together needs to be more than the fear of the unknown. That's a huge problem for a lot of folks, because that the scariness of this unknown can stop them. That becomes the wall.
Or vice versa. Many people so fear the unknown that they remain with the familiar, even though they know that it's unhealthy. And I want to talk about this wonderful topic of courage. And Poppy's heard me many times kind of go into the cowardly lion kind of imitation. It's courage that he talks about. The courage that is something that is like the engine, we call it. It's the spring that moves this whole clock forward. And it applies right from the very start, from 1 o'clock all the way on. When you are at the 1 o'clock confusion, the 2 o'clock anxiety, and you remain stuck on that right side of the clock. As Poppy already has said, too, it's the disempowerment side of the clock. And it always takes courage to identify and address all these issues and move forward. And it doesn't mean there's an ending. It just means that you'll really look at this issue. And for every single part of it, we'll always talk about it's best to summon the courage as early and as soon as possible. Anytime, and this is one of the things that Poppy and I feel very proud of the fact that in our relationship that we're in, that we always try to address things the moment we feel the 1 o'clock confusion, that there's any kind of things that are troubling us, that we try to address them early on. Yeah, and even, a lot of times we get fatigued after the holidays. We had a lot of wonderful family time and lots of generations, and it was great. And that takes its toll too, so that when we look at something through eyes that are fatigued and a soul that's fatigued, a lot of times negative thoughts just happen to appear. That just happens, and we had a while ago, we had a couple that we worked with, and they'd hit the 6 o'clock wall. One of them had a substance abuse issue, the spouse said, "I'm done." The partner saw a glimpse of what was being thrown away, and unless changes were made and that partner went to AA and no longer drinks again, that was the contract, basically. And that was almost 2 years ago, and they're still together. And the partner is sober and clean, and
it worked.
It worked out. And so it can be done. I mean, a lot of times, I know that it's challenging. It wasn't easy for them, but the partner had a glimpse of what the future would be like without the spouse, and realized, hey, I don't want to throw this away. This is too good.
And he summoned the courage to say, I'm going to stop drinking, which is wonderful. When people have used up use this reservoir of courage and fix these things that they've addressed with us, they can move on to the left side of the clock, the empowered side of the emotional clock. And the setting at 7 o'clock is relief. And this is a huge piece of the equation. The minute you make a decision to change something, to fix what's wrong in your existing relationship, or to say, I can't fix this and I need to move on, either way, you feel a feeling of relief. And one of the things we do see, though, sometimes people get to this spot and they can slip back. They can feel that moment of relief and say, "Oh, that feels good," but that's still too much of a big jump for me. And they can pedal backwards from that point. But if they stick with it and have the courage to move forward, the next important thing to get to is the 8 o'clock setting, which is forgiveness, the time where you can say, "I forgive myself and I forgive you."
Right. And, the thing about that relief setting at 7 o'clock, whenever we meet with someone, even if you choose to have a 30-minute free consult with us, which is a great value, by the way, and we see if you're a good fit and you see if we're a good fit for you, that we always make sure that at the end of that 30 minutes that somebody that whoever is calling us in, a prospective client, feels some sort of relief. They have to, we always, it's kind of like the camp counselor when they go through the cabin. You always want to leave the cabin a little bit better than when you first got there. Well, we do the same thing with your emotional souls and spirits and psyches. We work with you to make sure that you feel better. And when we talk about that 8 o'clock forgiveness, like, wow, this is a biggie especially for women. It's the counter setting, for shame and guilt. If you looked at a steering wheel and you have the 10 and 2, imagine your hands are at 4 and 8. Okay. But we can fix this. And it's also, as Jeff mentioned, it's forgiving the other as well as you. You cannot possibly, if you secretly seek revenge for your partner or you have some resentment, you will not land on the empowered side of the clock on the left side. And you have to forgive. And we work all the time to help our clients reframe, shift their paradigms around the person in their life as well as themselves. And even if people do decide to end up splitting, there might be children involved, and we absolutely encourage our clients to maintain a healthy relationship with the mother or father of their shared offspring. I know certainly we do this. We entertain exes all the time. We're very close, always with the kids at the top of the pinnacle.
We even went golfing with Poppy's first ex to show you how gracious we are. The next setting is hopefulness at 9 o'clock. And here is you've forgiven the other person and you have opened yourself up to be hopeful again, hopeful about either the relationship that you're in being able to be wonderful and fulfilling and good again, or if you've decided to move on, that you can look towards a new relationship and feeling great about that. When Poppy and I shared our story with others at book signings, one of the things that we heard over and over, many people gush to us, they just said, "Oh, I just love your story. I feel like there's hope for me yet," which is a wonderful thing for us to hear, that our story can inspire so many others.
And oftentimes we will come across people that will put a big T sign with their hands, like time out. No, I'm done. I'm out. I'm not going to ever pursue or want to desire a relationship in my life. And we usually try and encourage and inspire them to shift that thinking a little bit because it is so limiting.
Mm-hmm. The next setting on the clock, 10 o'clock, is confidence. This is where you feel like you're pretty much home free here. That you're feeling good about. You've cleaned up the issues that you had either in the existing relationship or the new relationships that you can move forward now, and you can build on it. You can be vulnerable, and this is kind of what Poppy was just talking to. About vulnerability, to be able to move forward and be able to get back in the game. And one of the most famous quotes from our book we created is, with complete vulnerability comes absolute empowerment.
And this is one of our favorite quotes that we've written. And it's sort of, at first blush, it seems counterintuitive, but you cannot possibly get your heart's desire unless you're open and vulnerable. And we like to tease that vulnerability is like courage times 2. And you have to be vulnerable, basically. Then we move to the next setting, which is 11 o'clock on the emotional clock. And that is joy, something that radiates from you. It's obvious and palpable to everyone, and even especially you.
And then the pinnacle, the spot where we all want to get to, is 12 o'clock, and that's love. And when you're able to be all in, to open your heart completely and experience the perfect human expression of completeness, is total love for one another, and you receive it back. And the way you stay here is to keep all the conversation going. It's people often, this is where a lot of young relationships go off the tracks. They start off madly in love, but they don't maintain these very good disciplines of communication and keep moving it forward together.
So the moment you start wandering back to 1 o'clock confusion, you address its stat. So you can roar right back to 11 and 12. You might have momentary lapses at shame, guilt, or anger, but you're quickly intentioned to fly right back.
This happens, Poppy and I will experience this where, we all do. In fact, I often laugh. I'll say everything's fine until someone tells me otherwise, or, we get other people involved in the loop. It's always amazing when you get many other folks and many other pressures of society and life kind of pushing on you. You might have these little times where you fall off base with your relationship. And we have this happen to us, and we'll get in quick spots where we're not doing well. And
the time you spent in confusion or anxiety at 1 o'clock or 2 o'clock, that merely strengthens your relationship, and you sort through all the little stuff here. And basically, we like to say, you can go to Bermuda and have a vacation there, but definitely don't go to the emotional Bermuda Triangle. And this has been so much fun sharing this with you. We'll talk about the emotional clock throughout our podcast this year. It's once a week, starting on Tuesday, January 3rd. We'll continue every week, so look forward to it. And next week, we're going to share our insights and pearls that we learned from our day spent with our master coach, Jack Canfield, the Chicken Soup for the Soul best-selling author. He's also a Guinness Book of World Record champion who had more books on the New York Times bestseller list than any other author. Wow. Oh, anyway, we spent a day with Jack last month in Philly, and we learned and relearned so many things to share with you.
Our listeners, and speaking of being a listener, please make it your goal this week to listen, really listen, and share, communicate with that significant person in your life. In fact, you can use that little download that we talked about earlier as a way to do it. We found when we don't listen to one another, we tend to find ourselves drifting into that dreaded emotional Bermuda Triangle.
No, don't go there. Don't go there. Thank you for joining us for our second podcast of 2017, Your Relationship Makeover. Stay away from that emotional Bermuda Triangle, and please go to our website, relationalexperts.com, and claim your free gift, 5 words to say to your partner tonight to immediately improve your relationship and create intimacy.
Thanks for listening. We hope you enjoyed learning about our emotional clock, something else you can download from our site. Our communication tool we guide you to use to immediately get the heart of the issues and undermine your relationship.
Until next week, from Poppy and Jeff Spencer, the New Life Story licensed and certified coaches, here to help you find many 12 o'clock love moments.
Take care.